Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. My name is William Hemsworth. It's great to be with you all again on this episode. My guest at this time, he's the editor in charge of wherepeteris.com, and his podcast is Peter's Field Hospital. Mike Lewis. Mike, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks again for coming on. Hope you're enduring the weather out there okay.
Yeah, I'm here in the DC area, so it's about 40 degrees and
Oh, okay.
cloudy, but no precipitation. And where are you located?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay, so it's warm, I would
It
guess.
the high today is 59, and that's cold
Oh,
for us.
okay. So it's cold. It's freezing for
For
Tucson
us,
then.
yeah, exactly. Actually, about a month ago, we had some snow. Believe it or
Oh,
not,
wow.
it stuck around. We got about 3 inches. And then
Apparently it's like 10 degrees in Texas right now.
oh,
So
it's crazy.
uh,
Louisiana's like a high of 14. It's
oh, wow.
insane. So where Peter is, how did that all start out?
Well, so basically it started as a kind of a labor of love. It was just to give you a little bit about my background.
Sure.
Um, I started working for the Catholic Church in 2010, working for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in the communications office. Most of the work that I did was in publishing, communications, and marketing. I was part of the communications program. I laid out a lot of books. I put together ads. But my real interest, my background was in writing and in publishing. And I was really hoping that I'd be able to use a lot of those skills at the Bishops' Conference. And I did. Pope Francis was elected in 2013. So while I was still there, it was kind of neat because we had basically the staff meeting room or hall. They had the movie screens out, and it was like going to a movie theater. Someone heard about the white smoke, and 2/3 of the building piles into this room to watch the screen and to see the Pope come out. And because I was so close to the church, I had an opportunity really to read Pope Francis's daily audiences. For example, I was the designer who laid out the USCCB's version of Evangelii Gaudium, which
Okay.
was the joy of the gospel, Pope Francis's first exhortation. And I was really finding myself inspired by Pope Francis. I mean, I grew up JP2 era Catholic. I was born in 1979. He became Pope less than a year before I was born.
Right.
I loved Pope Benedict. Like, I really grew in my faith intellectually by reading his encyclicals, by reading Jesus of Nazareth. I studied that very closely. That was kind of my introduction to scripture. And in Pope Francis, I think a lot of Catholics, he was a bit of a shock to the system at first. And I can understand why. I had personally been undergoing my own journey with the faith. I went from a parish with, I guess what one could say was kind of a cold pastor who was very, very staunch. And Pope Francis talks about rigid pastors. And I went to another parish, and I wound up moving and went to another parish where they were getting a new pastor right after we started going there. And the new pastor, Father Dan, was 100% Orthodox. I mean, 100% pro-life, loved the Eucharist, loved confession. But what he exemplified for me was this, first of all, getting to know the parishioners personally. Like, up until that point, even though like my brother was in seminary at the time, but up until that point, I think most Catholics look at priests, and if they don't know a lot of them personally, it's sort of like, do I like his homilies? Is he nice to me after Mass? Maybe you have him over to dinner once every 5 years. Maybe you're golf buddies with him. It's sort of, was he nice to me at grandma's funeral? Like that kind of thing. That's how we, sadly, that in much of the Catholic Church, that's how we view our priests. We don't view our priests as our spiritual fathers in like a tangible way.
Mm-hmm.
But Father Dan made a point of the very first Sunday. He said, "I am going to get to know all of you. I'm terrible
Wow.
at names, so it might take me 5 or 6 times, but to actually get your name straight. But I will, I want to be there for you. I want to know you." And he really made good on that promise. He had all these activities going on in the parish, designated me to start the men's group, because my brother was a seminarian and he knew my brother. And really just dove into our lives, into our spiritual lives. His preaching was, very, very kind of down to earth guy, not a super intellectual, wasn't following the stuff going on in Rome super closely or anything. He didn't have a lot of these proclivities that other priests have, yet he was totally sacramental, totally focused on the poor, totally focused on personal conversion. And his homilies were regularly about this process of personal conversion.
Great.
So he arrived in about 2011, I think. And so then by 2013, when Pope Francis became Pope, between Pope Benedict talking about relationship with the person of Jesus Christ, like that really struck me when he wrote about that. And this vision of pastoral accompaniment that I had seen at the local level, it was like, for me, it snapped right away. That I thought I kind of got what Pope Francis was doing. And so I'm eating up his message. I'm looking at the gestures. I'm seeing, wow, this is really resonating with people. Especially since before 2010, I had always worked in the secular world. Most of my friends were not uber Catholics. Now I started to make a lot of friends at my parish because we had such an active parish. But before that, we had basically been make sure we do our Sunday thing and go to confession. And then, then the rest of the week, we're not part of a faith community. But I started to see that was how Pope Francis's message was really what he was really trying to do with his message and with his approach. Fast forward to about a year into the papacy, and I started to notice that a lot of my friends were saying, he says a lot of troubling things.
Yeah.
This is worrying. Some of the more extremists were saying that he was, a Freemason, like all that stuff was already starting to happen. And working for communications, working for the Catholic Church, I'm witnessing this phenomenon happening both online, on television with EWTN, and with the Catholics in my life, both from my old parish, which was more, I guess you'd say, traditionalist, but even my new parish, which was very, very dynamic in its approach, but also very orthodox. And these online sites were saying that Pope Francis isn't promoting the faith. He's undermining it. He's going to change doctrine. And I'm thinking, well, the USCCB hopefully is going to say something about this. And so I worked for the USCCB until 2017, thinking at some point along the way, the bishops were maybe going to respond to this or come out with some kind of like explanation of what he was doing. And that really didn't happen. And I got laid off. It was complete shock to me. In the middle of 2017, my dad had died a few months before. I had a new baby. I got pulled into this meeting. And in all honesty, I thought, sorry about that.
Oh, I know how it goes. It's okay.
I can't. What'd you say? I'm sorry.
I know how it goes. I have 4 of my own.
I was like, I shooed them all out twice, actually. It's like, all right. So let me go back to kind of what I was saying.
Sure.
So so I got laid off in the middle of 2017. And I felt like this was a growing problem that the leadership in the church wasn't really addressing. I found that a lot of the so-called defenders or pro-Francis Catholics, a lot of them seem to have kind of a political agenda, or maybe were pushing or were hoping for changes in the church that weren't going to happen. You know, I think they saw him as sort of this someone who might help them fulfill their political or their progressive agenda. Wasn't about just staying with the church, being with the church, being with the successor of Peter. So I felt like I didn't know what I was going to do. When I got pulled in for the meeting, I thought I was getting a promotion, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
And so,
Shock.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was because we had heard all this stuff about this reorganization, and I had been asked, like, well, what kind of role would you want in the reorganized department? And so I was just and they never mentioned layoffs, so I was kind of just looking forward to a different kind of position. And
Right.
So that kind of set me reeling. Like, I felt like my work for the church was not yet done, but I didn't know where my place was. Um, and then somewhere along the way, I wound up spending a decent amount of time online, and still following this church controversy, still discussing it online, on social media. And a group of us kind of had a little chat going on in Facebook. Paul Fahey, Pedro Gabriel, Brian Killian, a couple of other people, and we decided, and I don't know which of us brought up the idea, but it basically, someone said, maybe these conversations we're having, maybe we should post them on a blog or something like that. And so we brainstormed about, well, what kind of site do we want? What do we, do we want to just be an apologetics blog, or do we want to offer a more robust vision of the faith? Do we want to demonstrate the continuity of the faith? I mean, one of the things is when you're an all volunteer organization, it's sort of, well, whatever you feel like writing, as long as it doesn't, as long as there's no heresy and it doesn't contradict, our bigger mission, then let's go ahead. So the four of us started this just as a group blog, and along the way, different people approached us and said, hey, I'd be interested in writing for you. And then so we started to grow from there. We started to get some some recognition. Austin Ivory, the papal biographer, took note of our work. Various other Catholics, including bishops and priests, were reaching out to us. I was out of work for a year and a half, so that we kind of built it up till the end of. So we started in early 2018, and then at the beginning of January 2020, I started my new job, and working for a small Catholic nonprofit. And by then, we had. I'm sorry. I started a new job at the beginning of 2019. So you can edit whatever. I started a new job at the beginning of 2019. We had grown to maybe 10 or 12 contributors. We were posting content 4 or 5 days a week. The Vigano thing, the Vigano testimony came out, and I think that was a moment that was really a turning point. It was like all the vitriol towards Pope Francis.
Oh yeah,
it just took off, at that point, and people were coming to us and challenging us, and part of it was funny because our readers were sort of a combination of people who were from situations like us, where a lot of the Catholics they had known, they were JP2 Benedict Catholics, and then all of a sudden their whole parish is, to put it lightly, suspicious of the current pope. but so they found us kind of as a refuge. I think that a lot of the more reactionary sites or the conservative sites that had kind of turned on Pope Francis took offense at what we were doing, because we were trying to address the issues that they were concerned with, but in an orthodox way. So they calling us a heretic is hard when we're a bunch of NFP Catholics who are,
Right.
who follow Humanae Vitae and have been on the March for Life more years than they haven't, and who are involved in crisis pregnancy centers. And I mean, we're, in terms of our, I daily, until COVID, I was daily mass goer, weekly confession, weekly adoration. And that's part of the reason why I felt confident about what we were doing, because I really gave it up to the Lord to see what would happen, and we just kept growing. Anyway, so I had my job for about a year and a couple of months, and then I got laid off again at the beginning of COVID. But at that time, in November, or October, November, our site had blown up because of the Amazon Synod. So I don't know if you remember that controversy, or if your listeners have dealt with.
They do. They know.
Dealt with that. But basically, there were two narratives that were going on in the media. There was the sort of mainstream Catholic and secular media story, which was there was a prayer service in the Vatican on October 4th. It was the indigenous people. They did a little ritual. Wasn't that nice? Let's move on to the Synod. And then they covered the Synod day after. Oh, at the Synod, they talked about this. At the Synod, they talked about that. And on the other side of the spectrum, there was demon worship in the Vatican gardens. And that was the story of the entire Synod from that other side. So a lot of people who maybe didn't know, they kept hearing about this pagan worship or this idolatry in the Vatican gardens. They would they would want to know what the other side of the story was, but they'd go to the mainstream outlets and they would barely touch on it. Well, because of who we are, and because of our backgrounds, and because of what we had been studying and looking into, we really wanted to get to the bottom of, well, what exactly happened at that ceremony? What was that figure? What's the explanation? And Pedro Gabriel, one of our contributors, he's actually an oncologist who lives in Portugal.
Oh, wow.
He's Portuguese, speaks fluent English, writes fluent English. He's got that medical mind, right? He wants to deduce it. And so for about, I'd say he wrote about 14 or 15 articles over the course of October and November. As each development happened, he was on the phone trying to contact church leaders in Brazil and people in Rome to see exactly what was going on, and tried to break it down in an effective way. Now, I've got a little bit more reactionaryism in my in my background, so I'd be like, and I was editing everything that he was writing, because even though he's got great English, he's not a native speaker. So I was translating his English into, and I'd say, well, why don't you put this assertion, or, why don't you say this? And he's like, well, I don't have absolute proof that this is true, so I'm not going to say that. I kept trying to want to leap to the conclusion, and he was like, no, hold back. We're going to stick to the facts. If it turns out it was a pagan idol, then that's what we're going to publish. I just want the truth. And when that happened, we started getting links from NPR and from The Atlantic and a bunch of other like mainstream media outlets, who, especially when that guy threw the statues into the Tiber, then people kind of realized, like, wait a minute, there's something serious going on here. And we had this whole backlog of material that people could research and investigate. Anyway, so then 4 or 5 months later, the COVID pandemic starts. Like a lot of people who work for small nonprofits, I got laid off, but there was that unemployment benefit. And the site had gotten to the point where we were posting something every day. We were getting, we were posting articles from Italian philosophers and Mexican Rodrigo Guerra, who sits on the Pontifical Academy for Life, Robert Fastigi, the theologian at the Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit. They're submitting articles to me to post on Where Peter Is. And so it was also around that time where I was like, well, we've been talking about a podcast for the last year. Now I have the time. Let's do it. So we wanted to keep it the title within the Peter's successor theme. And one of the things that Pope Francis talks about is the church as a field hospital for the wounded, for sinners. And so, but because really our site is not about Pope Francis, but about Catholicism that's in communion with the Pope, we named it Peter's Field Hospital instead of Francis's Field Hospital. So, so yeah, that in a nutshell. And then we've just grown and grown and grown on a little break from the podcast, but we're going to start a live stream soon. That'll be on a fairly regular basis. And then I have another like an audio podcast that's in the works right now, but I can't announce it yet because it's still in the works, but things are moving. I mean, one of those things, like you probably know, it can be really time consuming to edit them after the fact. And so when I'm editing a 2,500 word article and doing, you know, a lot of freelance work and that on the side, and then, and also audio editing and uploading and marketing. I mean, that can be super time consuming. So, talking to a couple of platforms that may be able to host it and edit it. So that's something we're looking forward to. But yeah, so I counted it recently. We've had a total of 55 contributors in the history of our site.
Wow.
A lot of theologians, a couple of priests, some deacons, historians. We also recently published Fratelli Tutti study guide, which we talked about before the show. But it was the initiative of Paul Fahey, one of our original contributors. He's a parish catechist. That's his day job. And he loves making the teachings of the church accessible. I mean, that's one of his passions in life. That's great. You know, he loves encyclicals. He loves even USCCB statements. And, you know, he likes to break, and that's one of the things we do. We try to break things down so that they're comprehensible. But at the time I was really busy. So I said, Paul, if you want to do it, I'm happy to host it, to publish it, to support it in any way I can. So he pulled together a team of 6 or 7 people, and they put it together, and I just did sort of the final pass and a little formatting here and there. And yeah, so we offered that to our readers as a free resource. It's good for parishes or study groups, but basically it's a page or so per chapter, plus a few study questions or reflection questions.
Awesome.
Original artwork by Paul's wife on the front cover. So yeah, we're really proud of it. And we've also written a lot about Fratelli Tutti. So we have links to articles written by our contributors. We have Bishop Barron's analysis of the document linked to it. We've got, you know, so people can get a good understanding of the encyclical.
Okay. Yeah, and you published it as kind of like a happy birthday gift to the readers, because it's been around 3 years now, right?
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
it just so happened because there was something going on where we were making some last minute revisions and changes, and it was like January 25th or so, and it's like, wait a minute, we're coming up on our 3rd birthday. so we decided to hold on to it until that day. We released it to our Patreon sponsors early, but yeah, we're really proud of it. We've gotten good feedback from pastors and catechists. So
Great.
hopefully we can make more resources like that. Um, Actually, this upcoming year on the family, I think Paul is starting to pull together a team to work on the Amoris Laetitia study guide.
Okay.
So that's probably next in line.
So how has your readership grown over the past 3 years?
It has more than doubled every
Okay.
single year. Um, the first year we started in February, we maybe had um, a little under 200,000 clicks maybe, and then um, not even that, maybe 150. And then the year after that, we had 400,000. And then last year it was well over 800,000 clicks or
I mean,
views.
that's great.
And so and it's been on an upward trajectory. Like we had a huge jump in September of last year, and then we kind of maintained it. But yeah, we've had days where we've gotten close to 20,000. So it's a healthy blog for something that's
Sure.
that's still we're turning it into a nonprofit, and we hope to, because people have worked so hard writing for it, we hope to like, nobody's taken a dime from it yet, but we're hoping to compensate contributors.
Okay.
And so and we need to maintain the site. And then we've been talking to we've met and we've talked about hiring, maybe once we get our act together, and like an employee and a half
Mhm.
to manage it on on salary. But we're still converting into a nonprofit, and we're putting together a board with a combination of men, women, laity, clergy.
Okay.
So we're looking forward to it. I mean, it's all kind of, my personal management style um, is, well, what am I going to do today? So I tend to not look that far ahead. It started, I don't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. I have my focus is entirely on content. But then it came to a certain point where it's like, Mike, you gotta get organized. So we pulled a team together that's working on doing the administrative stuff. And they were like, if the site is going to continue, somebody's got to work on it full time. So which I've been doing kind of on a volunteer basis. um so yeah, that's it's kind of the trajectory that we've had. But it seems like every time there's a big article, or we get big attention from somewhere. Like, I wrote an article in America Magazine in August, and that's actually what led to our big jump,
Mhm.
between August and September. And then we were featured in a Vanity Fair article in late October, uh, with this whole QAnon phenomenon.
Okay.
um, One of the things is, so David Lafferty, one of our contributors, he has a PhD, I think, in comparative literature, but he studied, his area of study was reactionary movements in the early 20th century. So like British fascists and
Right.
things like, so conspiracy theory really works its way into that. So that's just an area of fascination for him. But when Vigano wrote that open letter to President Trump that said, that Trump wound up tweeting out, a lot of the verbiage in there was QAnon related stuff, and he picked up on that. So then, as the summer went on and the QAnon phenomenon grew, the reporter from Vanity Fair was starting to notice that the Catholic Church, especially with Vigano, was starting to espouse some of these QAnon ideas. Not the Catholic Church, but certain Catholics
Right.
espouse these QAnon ideas. And we were really the only Catholics that had dug into it until that point. So she interviewed both me and David, among other people that have been following this phenomenon. But obviously, getting quoted in Vanity Fair talking about this phenomenon um, attracted readers to our site, and different things like that. Austin Ivory has written articles for us now, and he's got a big following wherever he writes. So that's really been helped us grow. So yeah, it's kind of an odd thing to be to be someone that people go to ask about these things. But we kind of saw that there was a void that needed to be filled, because there was this phenomenon happening in the church that, like I said, with the Amazon Synod, it's like the leadership or the mainstream public figures weren't paying attention to what was happening at the grassroots level. And because we're from the grassroots, most of us are just suburban Catholics, we were seeing it firsthand and seeing that not many people were talking about it.
So what's been some of the feedback that you've received, whether good or bad, over the last 3 years?
Well, one of the first things that we received, once again, talking about Austin Ivory, he tweeted probably early in 2019 or so, that we were one of the best voices against or trying to stop a schism in the church, which is
high praise,
which is good. Yeah. One of the things that so we've been linked in the New York Times a couple of times, and one of them was a Ross Douthat column where he had just interviewed Cardinal Burke, and one of the things, and so he was saying, because Cardinal Burke's approach doesn't really have much of a long term, unless he's elected pope, or the church decides to all of a sudden change directions and fill his vision. So so basically he said, where does Catholic conservatism go now? And he named a few examples of people. And so he named Where Peter Is. And one of the things that he said was that, something along the lines of, we believe that the Pope rules by fiat, which isn't our view. Like, we're not saying that everything that the Pope says is impeccable, or if he speaks in an unofficial manner, that's doctrine, or we're not even saying that he can change doctrine. Basically, what we're saying is we're taking these statements that the magisterium teaches about the Pope, like the Pope is the guarantor of orthodoxy, or that when the Pope teaches on faith and morals, even when it's in an official way, using his ordinary magisterium, that we owe religious submission of intellect and will to his teaching. And the thing is, a lot of people maybe they can't see the connection or the continuity between earlier and later. So they think that we have just mindlessly, this is sort of the main question, is like, we have uncritically accepted everything, every utterance. They use the word utterance. It's the only time I ever hear that word. Every utterance of the Pope is infallible, is the accusation that we're given. And that's not actually my position at all. My position is that a private Catholic, if something is taught according to the magisterium, like when the Pope gave his teaching about the inadmissibility of the death penalty, that was an exercise of his ordinary magisterium. That's the magisterial teaching. One of the problems is a lot of his critics are saying, well, that thing that's in the catechism, and that's in that official document, and that's in Fratelli Tutti, that's not the real Catholic teaching. Read my blog, and then you'll see the real Catholic teaching. But that's not really how it works. God forbid, there are dissenters from the magisterium out there, but for some reason, when they disagree with the magisterium, they can't make 1 + 1 that they dissent from the magisterium. Instead, it's a false magisterium. And all I'm saying is, if you disagree with it, that's between your conscience and God. But you can't change what the magisterium says on the books.
Right. Okay.
And and then their comeback is, well, Pope Francis can't change it either, and go from there. But with and under Peter, I mean, that's we have to have, I mean, that's one of the things. We give away a little bit of we don't give away our free will, because we're free to dissent, we're free to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to Catholic teaching, we have to trust that the Pope is safeguarding it. Now, he can make terrible prudential decisions. He can fluster you. I've read plenty of things that Pope Francis has said where I would not say it that way if it was up to me. But I try to understand where he's coming from, who he's trying to address.
Dig a little deeper than the surface level stuff.
Exactly. It's not always a one-to-one correlation. It's not always, well, John Paul said this and Francis said this, and therefore they completely contradict. It's, well, here's the problem, here's the issue, and this is the Catholic core doctrine, and this is the way Pope John Paul chose to address this, and this is the way that Pope Francis chose to address this. They agree on that core doctrine, but what is our response to it as a church? And I know that, like, Pope Leo and Pius X have talked about the living magisterium, where the Pope isn't supposed to change with the times, but the Pope, and the purpose of the living magisterium is for the Pope to respond to the times. And I don't think anybody disagrees that we're going through some crazy times, and that Christianity is losing its grip, if it hasn't already lost its grip, on our culture. And so we've kind of reached the point where the majority have already left. If not in name, they aren't going to mass anymore. They don't believe all the church's doctrines. And that wasn't the situation during Christendom. And so it's like, how do we even start with people who, when you say that's a sin, and they don't even know what a sin is, or they don't even know what the consequences of sins are? It's like, you have to start with, here's a better way of living, or here's a, let's start to look at the human person and talk about, instead of, and we saw this with John Paul, where he started talking about the gospel of life and talking about dignity of human life with abortion, for example. Before, the church didn't really use that language. It was more like, it was more the negative. Don't do that. It's killing. It's a sin.
Right.
Well, if they don't even know why that would be a problem, we have to talk about the human person first, which is who has God-given dignity because God created us in his image. If that makes any sense to you.
Absolutely. So if someone listening wants to contribute to Where Peter Is, how can they go about doing it?
So the easiest way would be to support our Patreon. If you go to wherepeteris.com, there's a link on the right-hand column of the homepage, and then at the very bottom of every article, there's a link to our Patreon page. We also accept PayPal. And then once we get our nonprofit status put together and have a little bit more financial structure, we'll probably have a more tangible way to do it, or a little bit more formal way to do it. But right now, all of that is helping, obviously to start an organization, you need the legal and the accounting help. And we recently had some website issues that we got resolved. So, we're paying more now for web support, and we're paying more now for, since our traffic has grown so much, we had to raise our capacity. We crashed one Sunday morning when we had 2 posts that got a lot of traffic. So so that would be great. Yeah, Patreon, or it's Patreon/where_Peter_is.com.
Okay. All this stuff costs money. It's not free.
Yes.
Well, Mike, I thank you for taking some time to talk about Where Peter Is and the labor of love that's grown into this big website, man. It's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Love to have you contribute if you if you're ever interested in writing. I've looked at your blog. There's a lot of good stuff on there. So
Oh, thank you. No, thank you very much. Definitely, I definitely will. It's just a matter of getting the time once all the school stuff with the kids settles down.
we don't pay as much as Patheos yet.
I haven't got a dime from them yet, man, so it's okay. Because it's all based on views.
Yeah.
But it's fun to do it out of love. I don't do it for the cash, even though it's nice. I'm not gonna lie, but it's for fun. But anyway, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Take care. God bless.
You too.